Hey again, all you beautiful internet people out there. Nick Cicada here, coming in hot with another top 10 list. On today's exciting video, we're going over the top 10 new wave albums that you should listen to right after you watch this video. Don't listen to these before you watch this video, but watch this video and then go listen to these. New wave is such a fucking cool genre, and it's influenced me so much. It's had such an impact on the trajectory of my life and my music career. And yet, for whatever reason, so many people don't understand what new wave is, even though there's a very basic, cohesive new wave canon that I think more people should pay attention to. Spotify certainly doesn't help. Spotify classifies a lot of post-punk songs as new wave and a lot of new wave songs as post-punk. And some people confuse new wave with new age, and some people think I invented new wave without recognizing that there's a long and storied history to the genre. So today I'll be going over my favorite new wave albums that I listen to pretty often. If I had to describe new wave in a couple sentences, I would say that it's the type of music that would be playing in Pee-wee's Playhouse all day. If you've ever seen Pee-wee's Playhouse, in fact, Devo composed the theme song to Pee-wee's Playhouse, so that's why it has a very new wave type look and feel to it. But basically neon, Memphis group type aesthetic with like puppets and fish and weird shit going on. And new wave will typically deal with subjects that are a little more heady, a little more interesting than just the basic shit that you get with a lot of pop that's like, I'm in a hot relationship with this hot girl. A lot of new wave songs will be more about like aliens or dancing or some kind of Kafkaesque nightmare with no escape. Heady subjects like that, as opposed to just like really predictable slop. New wave, at least in its original incarnation, is a kind of Reagan-era re-examination of 1960s pop and 1960s values. And I never really thought about this, but I've seen a lot of articles that state how a lot of leading new wave figures kind of played up their whiteness or their straightness. So if you dislike acts like Limp Bizkit for the cultural appropriation aspect, and just like how corny and shit that tends to be, new wave is like extremely white, nerdy, basic rock that doesn't really try and like steal anything from like Jimi Hendrix or whatever. You won't see new wave trying to get in on that. So I would argue new wave is one of the least culturally appropriating subgenres of rock out there. One could also argue, of course, that it's a subgenre of pop. I like new wave because it's indicative of an era when rock and pop tried to be thought-provoking and experimental and really out there, and you didn't get all this boring, repetitive sludge. Which isn't to say that boring, repetitive sludge wasn't a thing before, during, and after new wave. Boring, repetitive shit has always been a problem in pop and rock for the entire history of both those genres combined. For what it's worth, I think it's difficult to be bored listening to a new wave album. I just think new wave doesn't really get the critical reappraisal of something like disco, because it was much less a form of expression for like the Latino community, the LGBTQ plus community. You didn't really see that as much in new wave. In fact, I would say new wave is characterized a lot more by female figures than something like disco. I think it's a shame, though, that new wave has never gotten a critical reappraisal like disco, and a lot of people are confused about what new wave is. Some people say fucking Joy Division is new wave. What a load of shit. Imagine listening to Unknown Pleasures and thinking that's new wave. New wave, it has to be fun, it has to be fucking catchy, it has to be fucking thought-provoking, or it's just not new wave. And I'd say that's the main thing to keep in mind as we go into these new wave albums. So, without further ado, let's go into these new wave albums, and I'll talk about them as we go along. At number 10, we have Wang Chung's album Mosaic, featuring the fantastic single Everybody Have Fun Tonight. This is the only Sophistopop album on the list, Sophistopop being, of course, a British variant of new wave. And as with a lot of things that America invented, like rock and roll itself, Chuck Berry obviously was an American. Britain took new wave and was like, "Boy, mate, this is ours now. We made new wave actually." But it's very apparent that, like, Britain wasn't responsible for new wave. But for what it's worth, I would say that Britain did make some pretty dang decent new wave albums, much better than they were able to do with just straight classic rock, like with the Beatles and stuff. So I do think there's something about new wave that is specifically suited to Britain. British people can make pretty good new wave. They have kind of that kind of posh, angsty sensibility about it. Also a very sentimental bent, which I guess is why a lot of sophistopop is like sort of indicative of times gone by and sort of just like, the bland middle-age existence. It's good midlife crisis music to put on, I guess, is the point to make. It's like shit you'd hear, in the back of like a home improvement ad for a sunsetter patio covers or whatever. As for Mosaic, I think Everybody Have Fun Tonight is probably my favorite sophistopop song. My second favorite would be Blow the House Down by Living in a Box. It's so weird to see these like 30-year-old British guys with poofy hairdos like just partying down. But Wang Chung is a pretty dang interesting duo if you look into their history. Mosaic also has Let's Go. Let's Go is great, extremely catchy tune, just a gosh dang bop. This is the type of music that I imagine would make filling out boring paperwork fun if you just listen to these songs. Mosaic does not have Dance Hall Days, which is another great Wang Chung song. It does have Everybody Have Fun Tonight. What an ultimate, like, jam, just a great song for a party, a great song for, like, I imagine like a high school reunion or something, just taking advantage of the moments as they come and not letting any moment pass you by, and all the world is Babylon. And there's something so wistful about it. Like I say, the British New Wave tends to be a little more, it has kind of a melancholic edge, but even then Everybody Have Fun Tonight is a pretty fun song. And they did a re-recording of it recently with like an entire orchestra. Just mental, like you see both Wang Chung guys still just like jamming out to a new version of Everybody Have Fun Tonight. I think I prefer the original, but to each their, I'm sure some people prefer the new one. I can't imagine too many do, but maybe, I don't know. It's just kind of impressive to see the differences between the original and the new version. But regardless, Mosaic is so much more than Everybody Have Fun Tonight, and I would highly recommend listening to the entire thing all the way through. It's the point at which Wang Chung got really refined, they really smoothed over all their gaps, and they got into that mindset that's just like, we're going to make sophisticated British pop music. It's going to be refined, it's going to be classy, it's going to be sharp, and it's going to be fun, and everybody is having fun tonight. So, listen to Mosaic. A darn good album, probably the best British New Wave album, I'd argue. At number 9, we have Trapped in the Body of a White Girl from 1987 by Julie Brown. Julie Brown is one of those figures who I think is just hella underrated. I have no idea how more people aren't aware of Julie Brown. She's insanely funny, she's insanely clever and witty and talented and prolific, and her career is one of those that it just gets crazier the more you look into it. She's basically equivalent to Weird Al Yankovic in the way of novelty music, and you never see novelty music this creative these days. I hear everyone going on about like Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. Holy shit, these songs are so funny, but they're just like really vulgar and try hard and like needlessly edgy, and it just screams like I'm full of shit. Crazy Ex-Girlfriend is the dumbest novelty songs I've ever heard. Whereas with Julie Brown, I think the appeal of Julie Brown is like the subtlety. On this album, you can hear Every Boy's Got One, which is just a master class of innuendo, and it's just like oh, you think she's talking about a penis, but she's talking about a heart. It's so sweet, and it's like a freaking sappy anthem that's just like, it makes you happy, and it just, just such a bop. And you got I Like 'Em Big and Stupid. The lead track, which opens the album, is really, really catchy. Damn it, hang it out to the... Julie Brown really sells the image of like this complete ditz, and I can't say that anyone before or since has convincingly sold that image to the extent that Julie Brown does. Obviously, of course, she's also behind the song Earth Girls Are Easy, which isn't on this album, but was on the album before this one, Goddess in Progress. I would also say Earth Girls Are Easy is a pretty good movie to watch if you want a good idea of the new wave aesthetic, the corresponding new wave aesthetic that goes along with new wave music. And Julie Brown is in a supporting role in that, and it's absolutely freakish and wild, and every single second that Julie Brown is on screen is just like, wow, it's so manic and charismatic and wild. And yeah, Julie Brown is just really a fantastic figure in new wave. For whatever reason, very few people, I guess, would consider Trapped in the Body of a White Girl a new wave album, but I absolutely fucking would. It has every single element, the neat aesthetic, the cool colors, the music video for Trapped in the Body of a White Girl is great, and the effects, specifically the like very jarring, boingy, springy, mad scientist-y type sound effects. It just sounds like a freakish demolition event. Anyway, yeah, that's Trapped in the Body of a White Girl by Julie Brown. What a lovely, lovely little album. It's really funny, it's really catchy, it's really inventive, it's hilarious, and did I mention it was funny? And it's great. Yeah, give it a spin. If you've never heard it, you're in for a wild time. Okay, going to something a little more earnest, we have Beauty and the Beat from 1981, the debut Go-Go's album. This one doesn't have Head Over Heels, it's got Our Lips Are Sealed. There's a big debate, obviously, over which is the better song. I like Our Lips Are Sealed just a little bit more. I do think it has more of a punch to it. I feel like the Go-Go's are kind of spreading their attitude all over the track. I don't really get that impression with Head Over Heels. With Head Over Heels, I feel like it's kind of become formulaic. The really interesting thing about the Go-Go's is just how frickin' 80s-ish they look. It's difficult to name a band that looks more frickin' 80s-ish. They all got these Reaganite hairdos, and it's not to say they're not cool or anything. I mean, all 5 Go-Go's look pretty dang cool, but their hairdos are like frickin' straight off of Nancy Reagan, just this coiffured, just stringy type look. It's very specific to that span of 10 years, and then just completely delved off the face of the earth. Beauty and the Beat, I would say, is the most heady, the most cerebral of all the Go-Go's albums. Our Lips Are Sealed is a very interesting song. It's basically about the concept of gossip and gossip run amok. And I think it's also a nice song to listen to in the age of internet culture. If you're getting a lot of shit online, just pop on Our Lips Are Sealed, and all the Go-Go's are like, well, fuck the haters. It's a very ahead of its time song in that way, although, I guess people have been being dicks to each other for as long as people have existed, so it's a very interesting subject matter for a song. You don't see many bullying-oriented songs, especially like pop songs. So again, that's just another great example of how new wave music can be very different. The entirety of Beauty and the Beat has a much more interesting, in-depth look at the Go-Go's than I would say a Talk Show or Vacation. I think Beauty and the Beat really says it all with the album cover, where they're all in the Madonna get up and they got the face masks and towels and everything. It's just kind of like, oh, this is going to be a very interesting look at feminism, and especially in the context of the 1980s, the parameter of this wild new decade that's just kind of going to change America in so many ways. It was a very transformative decade, the 1980s, and this is a pivotal new wave staple. This is one of the biggest most respected new wave albums in the game. Although, of course, the Go-Go's don't really get as much clout as they deserve, I feel. Obviously, because of their gender, it's a systemic problem. But again, you know, a lot of new wave acts were like women and did not get their fair share of credit for just like how much they revolutionized sound. Our Lips Are Sealed is a very, very, it's so catchy, it's so smooth. You just get these like fuzzy, bright feelings all over that song. It's epic. At number 7, we got More Songs About Buildings and Food from 1978 by the Talking Heads, the first Brian Eno album, and I would say a lot of people will obviously be like, well, you know, Nick, you should have put Remain in Light here. Remain in Light is a cliche pick at this point. Everyone says Remain in Light. I like More Songs About Buildings and Food because it's got Take Me to the River, which is probably the catchiest Talking Heads song. I wouldn't say it's the best necessarily, and I'm also aware that it's a cover, but like, gosh dang, it's so snappy, it's so punchy. Tina Weymouth's bass is on there. Tina Weymouth is my favorite bassist, and it's so freaking awesome when David Byrne hits those high notes like, "Drop me in the water." I don't even know what that is, but it's amazing when he does that. More Songs About Buildings and Food also, of course, has the big country, which gives the impression of like flying over this expansive, wonderful landscape, this American pastoral dream that you're just floating in the clouds over fields of hay. It's a very nice song. And for whatever reason, I don't think any of the songs on More Buildings and Food has a music video or got very big, but it's damn good material. It's better than the stuff on their debut album. And I like the album cover where each talking head is like split up into like 50 squares. You don't see that these days. You don't see album covers that creative these days. You know, Kanye's just like, I'm gonna make my album cover all dark, and that's gonna be the album cover. It's called Donda. You know, fuck Donda. Listen to More Songs About Buildings and Food any day over fucking Donda. Fucking trash album. Anyway, yeah, so More Songs About Buildings and Food. Good example of a 70s new wave album. It's very like instrumental, even though not all the songs are instrumentals. It just has kind of that vibe. There's not really the vocal presence of Izimbra or Once in a Lifetime or Burning Down the House, any of those. So what you have is very like stripped back, laid back tracks. And I would say this is also the album where Talking Heads kind of came into their own. Besides, you know, the debut album, they don't really sound so much like themselves, but in part due to the Brian Eno production, you really get that nice, punchy, grab you by the neck and twist you every which way kind of feeling that Talking Heads later became known for. So I would say More Songs About Buildings and Food is a must-listen for any new wave listener, any Talking Heads fan, and yeah, it's great. At number 6, we have Trans, 1983, Neil Young's only new wave album that I would classify as new wave. I feel pretty confident in saying that Trans is a new wave album because it's got a lot of songs about computers, lots of songs about robots. This is some futuristic ass shit, futuristic for 1983 anyway. I would say that Trans isn't as different from the rest of Neil Young's songs as everyone says it is. You might go into Trans thinking, oh man, it's gonna fuck my head up. But no, it's just Neil Young with a synth behind him, a little pre-programmed drum machine is in there. He basically just makes, you know, Neil Young type songs. There's a lot of people who say that Neil Young is extremely versatile, and I would say he is in some respects. I mean, he's been making music for 50 years straight, so it's kind of inevitable that you'll have an extremely wide-ranging sound with that. Like he had his Everybody's Rockin' phase and his Trans phase, you know, Weight of the World phase, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young phase. But I would argue that at the end of the day, you know a Neil Young song when you hear it, and I just think it's kind of interesting that he has a whole new wave album. That's pretty cool. My favorite song off of Trans is Like an Inca, I would say, because you got that very wide sweeping Neil Young vocal range. Like an Inca, and the very nice percussion in the back, and he really goes at his guitar on this. But yeah, I would say Trans is not necessarily a futuristic album by today's standards, but it is very indicative of the view of the future as people in the 1980s saw it, that slick kind of cyberpunk look that was around for a couple of years. I have a lot of old books that have that kind of look, especially with like the futuristic car coming towards you on the album artwork and the old car going away. And I just find it crazy that Neil Young's label tried to sue him for just making a slightly more electronic-oriented album than his usual stuff. It's like, just let Neil Young do what he wants, you know? Just stop trying to box him in and make him fit your image, you know? He's gonna make a futuristic album, okay? You know, deal with it. It's so puerile. Trans is a great fucking album, and more people should listen to it. I'm amazed that it kind of gets overlooked in Neil Young's discography, because he is good at new wave. He's good at everything, you know. Every venture he goes into, he succeeds at. So no different with new wave. Trans is top tier stuff. Alright, at number 5 we have Plastic Letters from 1978 by Blondie, the second Blondie album after their debut and before Parallel Lines. A lot of people say Parallel Lines is the best Blondie album, or Auto-American, but I like Plastic Letters because it has a much more gritty, raw sound than Parallel Lines, and for what it's worth, I don't even really like Heart of Glass as a song. It's far from my favorite Blondie song. Rapture's better. I really like Denis, or Dennis, or Dene, or however the title is pronounced. In the song, she pronounces it Denis. So I guess the title of the song is pronounced Denis. But for whatever reason, whenever she sings it, Denis, it sounds like Denis Villeneuve, the director of Dune. I just think that's kind of funny. But I obviously know that's not who it's about, because he was like, you know, he wasn't around back then. I like Denis as a single because it's extremely catchy. It's Debbie Harry putting a spin on like a 60s French beach tune. Like something you'd hear in like Gang of Outsiders or something. One of those, you know, like a guitar movie, Breathless or whatever. And I think Denis is extremely catchy. Of course, Plastic Letters opens up with Fan Mail. What a well-written, structured song. It's got such a nice feel to it. It's a great opener. And everything about Plastic Letters really is all you need out of Blondie. It's got a very gasoline feel. Debbie Harry and her bunch rising up out of the grit to make a name amongst the stars, you know, and it's got a very shiny feel to it also. Less so than Parallel Lines or Auto-American. One thing that I think gets overlooked about New Wave is that it in itself is like an examination of the concept of pop music, like a very deconstructionist type look at pop music. And I kind of like that. I kind of like how it examines the tropes and cliches of rock and pop genres and picks them apart and looks at them. So, you know, Debbie Harry obviously has very much like a Marilyn Monroe type image, but everything about Blondie just, you know, just feels a little off. It just feels all a little off. Everything about all the Blondie classics. I really like that, and I think more people should listen to Blondie in general. It's a great band. Everyone obviously brings their A-game, guitars and percussion. It's just so dang tight. Everything about it is, it hits the right spot. So yeah, Plastic Letters, I would go so far as to say it's my favorite Blondie album. I do like it more than Parallel Lines. Got more of a DIY type aesthetic going on. It's difficult to describe exactly why I like Plastic Letters, but yeah, I really dig this album, and I think it's Blondie's best. Number 4, we got Freedom of Choice, 1980 by Devo. The obvious choice. I can't say that any Devo album is better than Freedom of Choice. Freedom of Choice is a fun listen all the way through. I don't really like Are We Not Men as much. I don't really like Oh No It's Devo as much. I do think Devo hit their peak with Freedom of Choice, because you've got two songs on here that are so ridiculously good. You got Girl You Want and you got Whip It, and both of those really catapult this album into the stratosphere of legendary albums. Mark Mothersbaugh really came through with the heaping of toppings on this one, and every single one of Devo is just bringing their A game, just totally nailing it with those guitars and those synths and the very springy, boingy sound. Devo obviously has a very unique aesthetic unto themselves, sort of like Mr. Potato Head inspired, which again is why they made the theme song for Pee-wee's Playhouse. It's got a very like Play-Doh type feel to it, zombie type vibes going on, and nowhere is that more apparent, I think, than on Freedom of Choice. Girl You Want is such a great song. It's such an interesting type song about like, yeah, it captures the vibes of like the Ed Sullivan Theater, you know, all the girls going crazy for the Beatles, except it's Devo. And it's funny because it's like Devo is way wackier, and you got like the gags with like the guy spilling beer on himself and shit. That's a fun ass music video, and very cool in how it has like the color balance is all off, so everyone's like green and purple. And you got Whip It. Whip It is an examination of like forced masculinity and Marlboro advertising, which again, you know, just a very fucking interesting thing for a pop song to examine in frickin' 1980. Like, imagine that, just like a pop song that like takes a critical look at like gender roles, and some argue it's about BDSM. I think it's more about like, you know, like toxic masculinity and like just like the feeling that you have to do this dumb shit to like perform your gender, and it's fucking interesting. Like Devo is on to something back there. Aside from that though, Whip It is just like an insanely catchy song. You got the whip cracking in there, like that whip sound. Oh my gosh, just what a thrill. And every song on Freedom of Choice is worth listening to. I know it sounds like I can only name the singles on all these albums, but rest assured, if you listen to a new wave album all the way through, you're not going to be bored once. Even if there is filler on a new wave album, it's going to be extremely fun filler. So just, you know, sit down for 40 fucking minutes and pop any of these on. And Freedom of Choice, I wouldn't even say has any dull moments. It's like really exciting all the way through. Alright, at number 3 we have Dark Sneak Love Action from 1991 by Tom Tom Club. This is the latest album on the list. 1991, I would say, is kind of the latest that New Wave was a thing for, but I would say that it continues to have its influence in genres that don't even know its name, and of course I'm part of a New Wave revival, so that could be said. But Dark Sneak Love Action's kind of the tail end of the original wave of New Wave, and this is of course Chris Frantz and Tina Weymouth's little side project off of Talking Heads. Tom Tom Club is so much more than just Genius of Love. I don't really like Genius of Love. I mean, there's obviously a reason why it's still being rehashed all these years later, but there's so much more to Tom Tom Club, and more people should listen to it. And it's a very different and distinct sound from Talking Heads, but a very interesting sound, because with Tom Tom Club, you get to hear Tina Weymouth put in some vocal range, and it's amazing how much vocal range she's got. Aside from just being an excellent bassist, the bass skills that she's got carry over into Tom Tom Club really well, so the bass is even more pronounced than on songs like Take Me to the River. So you have songs like Innocent Sex Kiss, As the Disco Ball Turns. My favorite off Dark Sneak Love Action has to be Irresistible Party Dip. That shit should be played at every fucking party, because it's just like, who else is going to make a song about a party dip? You know, nobody is making songs about that these days. Nobody has enough imagination to think, well, I'm gonna make a song about the fucking Funyun flavored shit that I dip my carrots into, because that's just a party staple. Lots of parties have that, but nobody else is making songs about it. got that nice little like thing that Weymouth does with her voice where it's like, hoo, hoo, hoo. I can't do it, but it's amazing. Like, there's so much vocal range in there, and everything about Dark Sneak Love Action is so funky. And this is before fucking TikTok came around and made every song like 2 minutes or 1.5 minutes. So every single song on Dark Sneak Love Action is like over 4 minutes, but don't let that put you off, because they're also fucking catchy and danceable and fucking hype that you'll never get bored. They're a little repetitive at points, but like, holy shit. Just the amount of grooves that are on this record, just the amount of like unique riffs that France and Weymouth are able to put in here, like, wow. I would say Dark Sneak Love Action is my favorite Tom Tom Club album. My favorite Tom Tom Club song is Beautiful from the Party Girl soundtrack, but that's not on any of their albums, at least to the best of my knowledge. So Dark Sneak Love Action is my favorite Tom Tom Club album, even though it doesn't have Genius of Love, Wordy Rapping Hood, any of the popular Tom Tom Club tracks. A group like Tom Tom Club is so catchy, and they know what they're doing so well, that like you don't need the popular shit. Every song is just a full-on banger. And Tom Tom Club's last album, Downtown Rockers, came out about 10 years ago at this point. It's got like Kissin' Antonio and shit. I'm amazed at how underrated a lot of Tom Tom Club songs are, because they're very good. This is like very good new wave. Alright, number 2, we got Nirvana Peter from 1985 by Peter Ivers. Peter Ivers is, of course, a very mysterious, enigmatic figure within the field of new wave. He's the guy who made the song In Heaven from Eraserhead. But what most people don't know is there's more songs than that where that one came from. So if you're into this extremely high-pitched voice and this really unnerving feeling, then Peter Ivers has got you covered. Peter Ivers is, of course, a key figure in the original iteration of New Wave, host of New Wave Theater, and he had a premature murder that remains unsolved to this day. He's kind of the Kurt Cobain of New Wave. He went way too soon. And there's this tinge of like sadness and not belonging in all of his songs, and it's just very tragic. He's a very tragic figure. But you also get the inkling that, you know, he had a fucking blast while he was here, and he fits the image of new wave to a T. He's one of the most new wave looking people you'll ever see. If you want to know what new wave looks like, just look up Peter Ivers, Google Images. That's new wave for you, 100%. Nirvana Peter kicks off with Alpha Centauri, which is just a fucking bop, and then closes out with the harmonica solo that's just called Harmonica Solo, and it's so epic what Peter Ivers is able to do with a harmonica. Nirvana Peter is a great example of a new wave musician just going at it on an unconventional instrument that you wouldn't necessarily expect. I'm pretty sure listening to Nirvana Peter was the thing that first got me interested in the harmonica and just how versatile an instrument it is if it's applied correctly. And I've gone on to incorporate the harmonica into lots of my songs because it's a lovely little instrument. I get the idea that Peter Ivers just spent so much time sitting around with a harmonica, just refining his skills until he's an utter maestro. He's probably one of the best harmonica players of all time, but I rarely see him like mentioned in terms of top tier harmonica players, because obviously you don't think new wave when you think harmonica. I mean, maybe you do think new wave, but you don't necessarily think rock. You mostly think like country and folk and bluegrass and like that. But he really applies himself on this. Got songs like Miraculous Weekend. It's so heartwarming and fuzzy and just like nostalgic. The album artwork captures that perfectly. Just Peter Ivers orbiting the planet with his harmonica in tow, just, you know, in complete harmonica-infused bliss. Just an absolute mad lad up there. Lovely, lovely album, and a perfect example of new wave. It totally nails everything that new wave should be, and I'm amazed at the number of people who weren't aware that, like, Peter Ivers has something going besides In Heaven, because every song on Nirvana Peter is absolutely worth listening to. And of course, it's from way before Nirvana was formed, so Peter Ivers was kind of onto something there. Alright, at number 1, we have the unparalleled emperors of New Wave, the B-52s, with Cosmic Thing from 1989. I'm not going to put the debut B-52s album on here because a lot of people consider that and Wild Planet to both be punk albums, which I pretty much agree with. I don't think the B-52s get into their new wave phase until later, but I do think Cosmic Thing is the peak of fun with the B-52s. It's the point at which they reach their most fun level, and then after that it gets kind of boring and repetitive, and before that it's a lot more experimental and heady. But Cosmic Thing is such a fun fucking album. I love listening to this. I've listened to this like a million times through, and every time I just find something new to enjoy about it. There's so much to like with Cosmic Thing. The title track is amazing, and it was featured in Earth Girls Are Easy, coincidentally enough, during the scene. Jim Carrey and Damon Wayans are driving down the highway at a zillion miles per hour. It's a very energetic opener. And you got Deadbeat Club. Deadbeat Club echoes the kind of sentiment found in songs like Bohemian Like You by the Dandy Warhols, except you get much less of a hipster vibe, which I like, and I think it more effectively conveys the idea of a bunch of do-nothing assholes without, making you not like them. It kind of promotes sloth in a very appealing way, and that's the slow part on the album. Then you get into Junebug, which is a lot like Rock Lobster, except it's about a swamp instead of an ocean. It's not as good as Rock Lobster, but it's a pretty good dang example of what the B-52s are capable of. You got Topaz, which is like this fucking Star Trek infused cosmic love story, where these two figures are connected telepathically, faster than the speed of light. Gosh dang, I really like that. There's something about Topaz, it just gets me. It's very characteristic of the time it was made. And then of course you got the amazing instrumental, probably I would say the most underrated B-52s song, Follow Your Bliss. Holy shit, that sounds like some shit that would just be playing outside of Pee-wee's Playhouse on a loudspeaker all day. In some ways it sounds like it would actually fit footage of Pee-wee's Playhouse more than the actual Pee-wee's Playhouse song. I know that sounds weird, but holy shit, those bouncy fucking guitar riffs. Do 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 do, and you got that fuzz on there. Holy shit, it's so cool. On Cosmic Thing you get just sounds that don't exist anymore, just the sounds of a sci-fi channel special that is just broadcast like a fucking beer commercial. It's got very extremely 1989 vibes. Dry County, here comes the girls up the road. And I feel like a lot of the earlier B-52s stuff, Rock Lobster, 6060, it's more dark. It's more like angry. Give me back my man. Cindy Wilson comes out and she's got that sultry, smoky voice. She cuts her hair. You don't really see any of that on Cosmic Thing. This is when the B-52s had all the edge taken out of them. They had all the depth and poignancy that characterized their earlier records, and you just have solid fun. After the really underwhelming, piss-poor delivery on Bouncing Off the Satellites, which is not remembered by anyone, and for good reason, it's really, really lame. And before the good stuff, which what was anyone thinking? Just no Cindy Wilson? What the fuck, They're called the B-52s because of the bouffant hairdos. If you just have one of the girls, it's just the B-52 at that point. They got Funplex. Funplex is an okay album. It's a decent way to, end off on, but, I just feel like it never really matches Cosmic Thing. It never really got to that level. You got Rome on Cosmic Thing. Yeah, you got Rome, which is delving into kind of the world music craze of the late 1980s, early 1990s. Roam if you want to roam around the world. And I really like the music video for Rome with like the esoteric symbology and the little animations that are a lot of fun, and the stock footage. It's just a very interesting song. Great example of how New Wave is capable of conveying more interesting ideas than just like, yo, you're hot and I'm hot and let's make out. So yeah, I really like Rome. I really like Dry County. I like everything about Cosmic Thing. I like every single song. In fact, Bushfire, man, Bushfire. There's a bushfire burning. It's rare that an album comes along that's like that, where I'm able to like remember every single song and something I like about every single song. But yeah, Cosmic Thing is just like a tour de force. It's probably my second favorite B-52's album after their self-titled debut, which isn't on this list, because again, I technically consider that punk much more so than a new wave. But Cosmic Thing is like peak new wave. It's just the new waviest of new wave. It's just on a completely different frequency. It's just transmissions blasting into your face, and it's got such a sci-fi vibe. It's got such a relaxing vibe. It's got such a fun vibe in every single song. And for that reason, I think it perfectly captures everything that new wave should be. If you listen to Cosmic Thing, you'll understand new wave. You'll know what it's all about. Anyway, that's all I got for this little list of my top 10 favorite new wave albums. What do you think about this list? Are there any I left off? What do you think? Are there some you like? Did I leave anything out about the production or sound of any of these? Let me know down in the comments below. And until next time, it has been Nick Cicada. It has been an interesting little top 10 list, and I just find it wild that nobody pays attention or gives due credit to new wave, and more people should. New wave is sick as fuck, and I fucking love new wave, and I make new wave. So you should listen to my new wave and listen to other new wave, and new wave it the fuck up. Get waved, yo. Anywho, sayonara, suckers.